Music Investment Fund, or OMIF for short. We are now kicking off the second year of delivering these information sessions virtually. In fact, this is the second session of the second year. We hope you and your loved ones are all managing to keep safe and well as we emerge from lockdown today. My name is Michelle Holtzgenner, and I am lead on the Music Industry Initiative stream of the OMIF. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Ward Dilts. We are two of the Ontario Music Office's 3 program consultants. Ward and I will be co-presenting today on the Music Industry Initiatives program. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Ontario Creates is an agency of the Government of Ontario that facilitates economic development, investment, and collaboration in Ontario's creative industries, including music, book, magazine, film, television, and the interactive digital media sectors. For today's session, we will take you through an overview of the Music Industry Initiative stream. The presentation should take about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we will open up the session to take questions. We will have our cameras off for the presentation, but we will turn them back on for the Q&A portion. In order to best manage the question period, we ask that you please type your questions into the Q&A box at any time during the presentation. And our colleague, Noah Grunier, who is the program coordinator for the MII stream, will help us filter through the questions at the end of the presentation. We ask that you keep your questions as relevant to the overall audience as possible. For questions that are unique or very specific for your company, we ask that you follow up with us after the session so that we can provide a more tailored response to your particular situation. And of course, if a question comes up to you after we're through, you can always contact us later by email or by phone. After the session, we will be posting the presentation on the MII page of our website for your reference, but we must reiterate the importance of reviewing the guidelines in detail. This slide presentation does not replace the guidelines. And on that note, I will throw it over to Ward to get us started.
Thanks, Michelle. In 2021, the OMIF replaced the former Ontario Music Fund and now reflects current government objectives. Broadly, the OMIF is intended to provide targeted economic development investment to the province's vibrant and diverse music industry, with a strong focus on supporting company and industry growth and developing emerging artists. The program's 3 streams are tailored to different parts of the industry. OMIF has some key goals that are important to keep in mind when you're preparing your application. The program focuses on supporting high potential music companies and investing in their long-term growth, while maximizing ROI for the province and increasing opportunities for emerging talent by targeting support at critical stages of artists' careers. Some anticipated outcomes include creating jobs and increasing revenue, profits, and private investment in the province, developing content or intellectual property for domestic and international markets that will lead to sustained revenues and jobs in the province, and increasing Ontario's profile internationally by helping to support the discovery and development of breakthrough artists. The OMIF is designed to support companies across the music ecosystem in Ontario. There are 3 program streams that will support different parts of the industry. The music creation stream is focused on supporting music companies that take risks in developing talent and bringing it to the market through activities like recording, marketing and promotion, touring, and publishing. This program launched in April with a mid-July deadline. The live music stream is focused on supporting live music companies that promote and present music events featuring Canadian artists, including music festivals and concert series. This stream will launch in late summer. The Music Industry Initiative stream, which is why we're here today, is focused on supporting music industry trade associations and music service organizations for activities with broad music industry benefits such as professional development and training initiatives, export activities, industry analysis, and data gathering, and to build regional capacity. The stream also has a distinct program providing export and market development funding for music management companies through the Global Market Development for Music Managers program to support participation in national and international activities that correspond to a strategy for company growth. If you are a music manager, you should be attending tomorrow's info session as well. Take a peek into the chat for the registration link. Please review our program policies documents for more specifics on our policies regarding respectful workplace, diversity, and accessibility. There is a link to this document on page 3 of the program guidelines, and it can also be downloaded directly from the MII page on our website. All applicants must sign an applicant affidavit confirming that their company has both guiding principles and a process for maintaining a respectful workplace, which is one that values diversity and inclusion, dignity, courteous conduct, fairness, positive communication, and the professional working relationships that are free from harassment and discrimination. The program policies document also outlines some key information regarding the application submission process, reporting requirements, and other obligations of successful applicants, and it also contains a full sample agreement template. Ontario Creates is committed to helping to tangibly increase diversity, equity, and inclusion within the creative industries. Our agency values and supports diversity and gender parity at all levels and business roles. We acknowledge that many communities continue to face systemic barriers that prevent them from participating meaningfully in these industries. As such, Ontario Creates applies a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion across multiple evaluation criteria for our programs. And Michelle's going to touch on a bit later in the application assessment section of this presentation. Applicants proposing activities that support, reflect, and strengthen diversity and gender parity in Ontario are expected to tangibly demonstrate a genuine and sustained commitment to these equity-seeking communities. And further, Ontario Creates encourages applications from companies and associations that are led by Black and Indigenous individuals, people of color, Francophone individuals, and applicants that otherwise meet the provincial definition of diversity. And again, you will find this on page 2 of the program policy document, along with the definition of equity-seeking communities. Exceptions to the program's eligibility requirements may be considered for applications from organizations among these equity-seeking communities. Essentially, this includes communities that have faced historic, systemic, and social marginalization barriers based on factors such as disability, economic status, gender, race, sexual orientation, and transgender status. We encourage any stakeholders from any of these communities to please contact the Ontario Music Office, ideally 3 weeks prior to the application deadline, or at least 3 weeks in advance, to discuss. And on that note, I will now pass it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Ward. The MII stream of the OMIF is open to music industry trade associations and not-for-profit music service organizations. Complete eligibility details can be found on page 4 and 5 of the guidelines, but the gist of it is on the screen for you to see. This program is focused on creating results for the broader music industry. We aim to achieve such results by partnering with music associations and organizations like yours to provide music-driven inbound and export-focused activities, Ontario-based conferences, professional development programming, etc. We support projects and initiatives that directly benefit your membership and or the Ontario music industry at large. To that end, to be eligible, applicants must be engaged in music-related activities in Ontario. Although you may also be engaged at a national level, we can only relate to activities that truly focus on the province. You must also have a track record in supporting the industry through the delivery of activities or programming. You must serve Ontario artists, companies, and entrepreneurs working within the music industry. So for example, this program is not designed for, let's say, tech companies with a really cool music app or platform, but for music-based organizations that seek to strengthen and grow the sector. You must be a not-for-profit Canadian organization. Now you can see that little asterisk. So some exceptions apply here. and may be considered for for-profit companies whose primary purpose is to develop, market, and stage events, conferences, and workshops that provide professional development and networking opportunities for music industry professionals in Ontario. Also, if you are a membership-based national organization, at least 50% of your membership must be based in Ontario to be eligible. Additionally, all eligible applicants must be incorporated in Canada and be in operation for at least 2 years, have a head office in Ontario, have management personnel who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents living in the province, and be in good standing with Ontario Creates at the time of application. And what that really means is that if you are a repeat applicant, your reports have been submitted on time, and there's no outstanding issues with your file. As Ward just mentioned, exceptions to the program's eligibility requirements may be considered for applications from companies that are led by Black and Indigenous individuals, people of color, Francophone individuals, and those from other equity-seeking communities. First-time applicants must contact the Ontario Music Office a minimum of 3 weeks in advance of the deadline to discuss eligibility. And by contact, we mean actually engage and speak to us, not just send us a quick email. We want to make sure that you are in fact eligible, but we would also like the opportunity to speak to you and guide you so you're able to submit the strongest application possible. Oops, missed a click on that one. Applications in this stream may be submitted until Thursday, October 28th at 5 p.m. through the Ontario Creates online application portal, fondly referred to as the OAP. Applications and documentation received after this deadline will not be considered. The stream has a minimum request of $10,000 and a maximum request of $300,000. Applicants may submit more than one application to this program, provided that the total request does not exceed the $300,000 cap. Funding is provided in the form of a direct grant towards the share of the total cost of eligible activities, which really just means you don't need to pay it back. Total government funding cannot exceed 75% of the total approved budget, and the OMIF contribution may not exceed 50%. Please note that there is a new system in place with respect to the eligible activity window. You now have additional flexibility with respect to the start date of the spending window for your approved activities. As of July 1st, activity spending may begin once you've submitted an application. Although this may be at your own risk, as at this point your application is yet to be approved. If you choose to start spending immediately after submission, you must also have a valid insurance certificate in place. So unlike previous years, you must submit your application before you start spending money. But when you start spending is now up to you. The spending window is triggered on the date that the first expenditure is incurred for any activity within the application. You will then have a maximum of 12 months to execute your activities. I know this is a lot. There is an example on the next slide. And in years past, if you're seeking funding for a public-facing event or activity, so this is showcases, conferences, training programs, etc., please ensure that your application is submitted a minimum of 8 weeks in advance. We are really not trying to be difficult about this at all. It really is intended to benefit both parties. So we want to make sure that we have ample time to review your application and communicate our decision to you, and hopefully even flow funding in advance of the event. But we also want to ensure that there's an opportunity to include Ontario Creates logo on your material, and even to further develop our partnerships. Just this week, for example, we helped one of our recipients secure remarks with the minister for their upcoming event. We were pretty relaxed about this stipulation last year, particularly with all of the inevitable programming changes as a result of COVID. But now, as we start to recover, we will be looking at this more closely. But for those who are familiar with the program, you may have noticed that we've reduced this from 12 weeks to 8. So in previous years, the eligible activity window ran from August 1st through July 31st of the following year. You are more than welcome to stick with that activity window if that's what you're the most comfortable with. However, going forward, you will have a more customizable 12-month spending period if you so choose. This should enable you to undertake projects at a time when it's most advantageous to your business cycle rather than fitting it in with our prescribed window. So in short, there is an expanded 18-month activity window, which is July 1st, 2021 through to the end of December 2022, for which you can select your own start and end dates as long as you do not exceed a 12 consecutive month window. So with Daryl's permission, we've used Indie Week as an example. So Indie Week's dates have already been announced. It's November 9th to 13th, which means that the absolute latest date that Daryl can submit an application is September 14th. Notice there the purple dot. However, Daryl has a few other irons in the fire at the beginning of September and doesn't want to wait until the middle of the month to start spending money. By the way, this is hypothetical. Daryl, you can do whatever you want to do here. So he gets his application in on September 1st, and later that very afternoon, he hires a social media coordinator. He does this at his own risk, as he knows that there is a chance that he may not receive funding, but he already has his insurance in place and has paid very excellent attention to the webinar and is feeling really confident. For Indie Week, the activity window would begin September 1st of 2021 and will end no later than August 31st, 2022. Of course, it can be shorter if that's your prerogative. Per usual, the final report will be due 30 days after the activity window concludes. I should also mention that if Daryl really wanted to wait to the beginning of November before he starts spending money, that is absolutely fine, as long as the application has been submitted by September 14th. As our old colleague Mark Watts used to say, clear as mud, right? If you have any questions, we can go over this again at the end. Activities. In developing your activities and costs, please keep in mind that we want to expand, strengthen, and stimulate growth in Ontario's music organizations and companies, as well as the broader sector. The OMIP will support new activities and expanded or enhanced approaches to existing activities that contain the following elements. The first is strategic development. This is support to develop new strategic initiatives that address challenges and opportunities for stakeholder groups, address specific environmental changes, and or other activities that contribute to building the capacity of the applicants. Professional development. Support to develop and implement business learning opportunities for the music sector, such as developing new components for existing conferences, including virtual and online offerings, presenting a regional industry conference, etc. Market development, support for new opportunities to showcase Ontario artists virtually or in person at domestic and international festivals or events, engage in trade missions, and expand export activities in global markets. Skills development, support for business and training initiatives delivered by music industry associations or organizations targeted at professional artists, technical or business staff, as well as music companies, owners, and managers. Digital innovation. This is support for new initiatives that provide resources, develop tools, including data analytic strategies, or develop digital platforms to raise the profile and economic impact of Ontario music and musicians. We also support administrative and overhead costs. Up to 25% of the total activity costs can be claimed for admin and overhead, such as staff salaries, office space, and corporate services that are directly used in the delivery of the planned activities. Equipment and software is also eligible as long as it's appropriately amortized. If rented, the actual rental cost can be included. And please refer to the MII program guidelines for all ineligible expenses. And remember, those proposing a higher percentage of Ontario-based costs will be considered more favorably as applicants who invest in increasing opportunities for emerging artists, as will applicants who invest in increasing opportunities for emerging artists to achieve success. Now I'm going to throw it back over to Ward to walk you through the sources of financing.
As mentioned earlier, the OMIF can contribute up to 50% of your total budget. The rest is your responsibility. Of the remaining 50%, an additional 25% can be from the other government sources, and you'll be required to contribute the remaining 25. I now draw your attention to the circle on the right. Your contribution can be comprised from a variety of sources: cash in the bank, financial investments, examples of that would be line of credit, investors, sponsorship, and in-kind donated services, as long as the in-kind costs do not exceed 25% of your total contribution. And don't worry, we've built in a few mechanisms into the budget template that will help you keep this in check. While some exceptions of the 50% OMIF threshold can be made, applicants bring a higher percentage of non-government funding will can be considered more favorably. It demonstrates sustainability and non-reliance of public support. Last program year, we created a new version of the activity budget template that is intended to auto-calculate as much information as possible and present it in a clear manner. The first tab contains some brief instructions, and then you'll find the financing tab on the second tab, which looks like this. The tab will will guide you through a financing plan test to ensure that you're adhering to all the necessary financing parameters. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we built in a cheat sheet into the template for you, clearly listing all relevant thresholds. When all the activity tabs have been completed correctly and all numbers reconcile and are within the allowable parameters, the financing plan tab will show that all tests have passed. If a figures do not reconcile or if a parameters exceed the red flags will appear like this. And you can see when that happens. The budget summary tab will auto-populate based on the amounts that are entered into each activity tab. There's nothing you need to fill out in this tab. The summary also provides a snapshot of your admin and overhead expenses. Like the sources of financing tab, a built-in test will indicate non-compliance. If we flip back to the last slide, an example of non-compliance is indicated. Please be sure to check both tabs are free and clear of red flags before submitting. The financing tab total budget must match the total expenses of all activities on the budget summary. And this is a flag that we noticed last year that people had challenges with. So just before you submit, just double check that. The application is only available through Ontario Create's online application portal. If you're not already registered with a corporate profile, we encourage you to set one up as soon as possible so that you will be able to review the application in its entirety. You can start the process by going to apply.ontariocreates.ca. OAP instructions can be found on the MII page of our website. We'll just give you a quick overview of the application. In Section 1, we just request basic company and contact information. In Section 2, request that the organization provides information such as not-for-profit status and applicant type. In addition, you will be asked to provide a summary of the organization's mandate and overall business strategy. This should align and be supported in your submitted strategic plan or business plan. And finally, explain how the business strategy has contributed to the success of the organization in Ontario's music industry. The last two questions have word count maxims, so please be clear, succinct, and high level. Section 3 is where you're requested to name and provide a detailed description of each activity outlining the anticipated outcomes and identify risk management and mitigation plans. We strongly recommend that you draft this content for this section in a separate document so you can just copy and paste into the OAP template rather than typing directly into it. In section 4, you must acknowledge that your company either has or will be able to obtain at least $2 million in commercial general liability insurance coverage before a legal grant agreement can be executed. Insurance coverage must span the approved spending window of your activities, which Michelle explained a little bit earlier. There are a number of supporting documents that are required as well. First is the activity budget template, which Michelle went through earlier in the presentation. And just a reminder, or I guess I did that, just a reminder to check that it has no red flags or any tabs before uploading. Comparative company budget must include both actual revenues and expenses from the previous fiscal period, as well as forecast revenues and expenses that correspond to the current fiscal year. This gives us a past, present, future snapshot. The company budget can be presented in whatever form it works best for you, and it does not need to reflect the OMIF eligibility window. You're welcome to use your own fiscal years. Next is your business plan, strategic plan. I'm going to touch on that on the next slide. Your articles of incorporation. And next is your financial statements. A minimum notice to reader financial statements are required for the most recently completed fiscal year and the previous fiscal year. Applicants with a December 31st year end are expected to supply 2020 and 2019 financial statements by the application deadline. If you do not have statements ready in time for the deadline, your application may be deemed ineligible, incomplete. And just of note, 6 months following the end of your fiscal year, you should have those financial statements always completed. We strongly encourage you to contact your accountant as soon as possible if you've not already done so, to ensure that your 2020 financial statements are completed by the application deadline. We found this process takes time and encourage you to get the process started now. Please note that internally prepared statements will be accepted for requests under $15,000. This can be an income statement that you or your bookkeeper prepared that gives us an idea of your company's capacity in terms of revenues and expenditures. Other supporting documentation is optional, but will strengthen your application. This would include supplier quotes, bank statements, letters of confirmation from other funding bodies, documents to support eligibility, such as membership breakdown, and anything else that you may want to use, letters of support, for example. And now to the business plan or strategic plan. Now, this is required for all applicants, and this can be either or. For your business plan, you have the flexibility to structure your plan as it best suits your organization. Essentially, we're looking for you to speak to the elements listed here and provide us with a business case for funding. We recommend that this document range between 10 to 25 pages. It should include your organization profile, strategy, and overview of all business activities. In addition, it should include a SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunities, threats analysis. The business plan should also speak to the impacts that COVID-19 had on your organization. We recognize that the recovery efforts and maintaining business operations are a main priority for music organizations during this crisis. And yes, the assessment process will take into account the importance of resilience and sustainability in the 2021-2022 program year. If you are a not-for-profit organization, you'll have the option to submit a strategic plan. The strat plan should include the organization's vision, mission, and values. It should include all aspects of the organization's activities and goals with identified timelines. In both the business plan and strategic plan, a case for OMIF funding should be incorporated. Should you be interested in more information on how to structure your business plan, please see the FAQs on the Ontario Creates website MII page, specifically OMIF technical question number 13. Now, back to Michelle to take you down the home stretch.
Okay, thanks, Ward. And by home stretch, he means assessment criteria, which is our final slide. Okay, so please see pages 10 and 11 of the guidelines for an outline of all of our assessment criteria. This is exactly what we take into consideration when assessing your application. So it absolutely cannot hurt to review this section of the guidelines more than once. The first thing we will be looking at is track record. Does your organization demonstrate that it has the organizational and financial capacity to effectively execute the activities that you've proposed? What are your previous successes? How present is diversity among senior leadership, staff, and/or contract employees? This is worth 25% of the overall score. Then we look at the overall proposal, which is worth 30%. Is your proposal thorough, well-written, and practical? Are your proposed activities and budgets feasible, appropriate, and achievable for your organization? Have you included the additional documentation, as Ward just mentioned, to help build your business case for OMIF support? Does your proposal demonstrate thorough, thoughtful consultation, collaboration, and participation of equity-seeking communities? Relevance and support for emerging talent, which is 10% of your score. To what extent do your activities meet the needs of the industry and/or address a demonstrated challenge? To what degree does your applications focus on supporting and developing emerging artists? Expected results. This is economic and cultural impact, also worth 25% of your total score. To what extent do the proposed activities have a positive impact on the industry and on the province? What is that broader impact? Here we look to you to describe your anticipated tangible and measurable results of your activities, such as the projected number of business meetings you may be holding, the number of jobs created, the number of artists supported, the number of showcases. So we're looking for anticipated, real measurable results. And finally, sustainability and resilience. This is also worth 10% of your score. Does your proposal demonstrate forward-thinking strategic planning, particularly in light of the COVID-19 crisis? Do the activities position your organization for long-term growth and sustainability? Please keep these questions in mind as you're crafting your application, because all of these assessment criteria tie back to the program objectives. Applications that speak directly to these objectives will rank higher than those that do not. You'll also note that diversity, equity, and inclusion criteria are now embedded across multiple assessment factors. Within your application, particularly in your activity descriptions, please ensure to speak to any tangible initiatives that your organization has already undertaken or plans to undertake with respect to improving or further embedding DEI within your operations and activities. Organizations that are led by members of equity-seeking communities may, if appropriate and relevant, choose to speak to their lived experiences as it relates to their operation. This shift is a reflection of our intentional attempt to lead to more BIPOC-owned companies being funded, as well as encouraging all companies to take further steps towards increasing diversity among their staff and operational practices in order to achieve greater representation of equity-seeking communities. These are broader program objectives that we trust will lead to a more diverse and equitable music industry. This integrated approach places more emphasis on DEI across the board rather than having it as a separate value, and underscores our expectation that this should be an upfront consideration across the various criteria. And with this approach, it carries more weight in the scoring process. Ultimately, applications that best demonstrate DEI across the board will also score higher than those who don't. And before we move on to your questions, which will be imminent, I'd also like to remind you that it is advantageous to get your application in as soon as you can, as all applications received after October 1st will be batch reviewed along with those submitted at the end on the deadline date on the 28th. At that point, the rolling deadline becomes a competitive process. We will endeavor to review them, when I say as soon as they come in, within about 8 weeks after submission, if you get them in before October 1st. So not only can you start spending money earlier, but you should receive an answer back from us earlier. The number of applicants who receive funding, as well as the amount of funding received, is dependent on the quality of the applications submitted, as well as on the individual needs of each applicant. We will be posting a tips and advice page shortly, so please keep your eye out for that as well. It will be located with the FAQ section. And I do believe, on that note, we are done. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to toggle to the last screen here if I can, so you can jot down all of this information if you don't already have it.